Hello, everyone. I would like to talk about Jacob Blake's fatherly decisions. Now, what prompted me to want to make this video is because of the interview that he had with Michael Strahan with ABC News. And upon watching the interview, I just began to question, how could that incident have been avoided? What could have been done that could avoid Mr. Blake being shot, which led to him being paralyzed? Now, what really struck me, though, was there were several quotes that he said during the interview that really grabbed my attention and questioned Mr. Blake's decision, especially when he was asked concerning his children. He said that, I thought about my babies. And I want to know, did you really, Mr. Blake? I had to ask that question to myself. Do you really think about your children, Mr. Blake? Then he also said that, Mr. Strahan, shall I say, asked the question, well, we know that your kids were in the car. What did you say to them concerning the incident? And Mr. Blake's response was, he said that when they saw me, they thought that I was dead. Now, I may not be quoting him exactly on this, but I'm just going to paraphrase it. When my kids saw me, they thought that I was dead. And I told them that, Daddy can die. I just didn't die today. And he talked about how his 8-year-old just stood there looking at him. And I was like, wow, really? But you say you was thinking about your children. What's your point, Mr. Nelson? My point is this. If Mr. Blake was thinking about his children, I question the decisions that he made. Whereas if he was thinking about his children, I wonder if he would have made the decisions that he did make. Now, what I would like to do is I want to play this interview. And I just want to break down some things because there are a lot of things wrong here. But out of everything that happened, out of everything that took place since then, the one thing I never hear anyone discuss, all I hear everybody talk about is what happened to him. But my question is, what happened to his children? The effect, the emotional effect that this would have on his children for the rest of their life. Now, let me go ahead and play this video before I go any further. So let's talk about Mr. Jacob Blake's fatherly decision, or shall I say his decisions as a father.
I was counting down my breaths and my blinks because I was just staring right at the sky, watching the clouds. I was like, God, I'm coming. I guess this is it for me, but it wasn't.
The 29-year-old speaking out for the first time, almost 5 months after being shot 7 times by police. You didn't resist.
I resisted to getting beat on.
Mistake number one, Mr. Jake, or shall I say Mr. Blake, you don't resist the police. So my question to you, was that a good decision? Let's talk about the decisions that you made as a father. My question is that what you want to teach your sons, teach your children, that when to not respect authority? And if you ask me the truth, that's what's wrong with our nation today, with our young people today. They don't respect authority anymore like they used to. When I was growing up, if your neighbor saw you doing something you had no business, they would tighten up your rump, then take you home, and then your parents would tighten your rump up. But that's gone now. That no longer exists. And if you ask me, it needs to return, because if it returned, maybe we would not have the chaos and the turmoil in which that we have right now.
We are scared as Black people.
Activists.
I'm sorry, Mr. LeBron James. You ought to be ashamed of yourself, because as a black man living in America, I'm not afraid. So to make that blanket statement is a false truth. You should be ashamed of yourself, sir. And I don't teach my black sons to be afraid of the police. What I teach my black sons is to respect the police. And if they give respect, they will get respect. Even if they don't get respect, at least they'll get to come home at the end of the day. That's what I have to say to that, Mr. LeBron James. It is not about them being afraid. I don't teach my children to live in fear. I teach my children to live with respect and dignity and do unto others as you would have them to do unto you. So we need to stop with that narrative. Let me continue on.
I didn't want to be the next George Floyd. I didn't want to die.
Right there. I am not concerned about being the next George Floyd. My name is Lionel Nelson. And whatever actions that I'm responsible for, Lionel Nelson is responsible for those actions. And I need to bear those responsibilities as Lionel Nelson and not George Floyd. See, that's the narrative that's being pushed in America, that every black man, every black boy can end up like George Floyd. I beg to differ, because I certainly have been stopped by the police. I certainly have had my encounters with the police, and I've lived to see 60 years. I'm not concerned about George Floyd. I'm concerned about myself. Let me continue.
In the moments before, on a hot summer day in Kenosha, Wisconsin, Blake had been celebrating his son Israel's birthday at the home of his son's mother, LaQuisha Booker.
You turn.
Nah, well, let me continue to play this because I want to say something here about this here. Let's listen to this now.
Years old that day. I'm cooking, just chilling, neighbors out, and ended up being an argument between my woman and the neighbor. I wanted to leave.
Booker didn't want him to leave with her rental car and called the police.
Now, well, let me play it again.
It's his son's birthday, so I allowed him to spend a couple hours with him, but he's not.
Why did she allow him? Why did she say, I'll allow him to spend a couple of hours with him? The reason being is because he wasn't supposed to be there. Now, it was interesting that if you look at this video, and even as I did research and I look at other articles that mention the timeline and the incidents that took place according to the witnesses, Mr. Blake, he says that his vehicle was in the shop. So he pulled up in the same vehicle. So first of all, she allowed him to drive it. She allowed him to drive. He got the keys from her. She allowed him to drive it. So whatever reason that was, but the fact of the matter that all of a sudden now there's an argument between you and her, this Miss Booker, and that prompt her to have to call the police on you. So it's not like the police that showed up just riding by and out of random and they saw Mr. Blake and they decided that they're gonna get in a confrontation with him. No, they were there on a call and they were responding to a domestic dispute. But she called them, okay? So now, why did she call them? Let's listen to this.
Giving me the keys to this rental, and that's all I'm asking for.
3 officers.
So in essence, she asked for the keys to the rental that he was driving, that she allowed him to drive. But I guess now that there's an argument between the two, so now she's asking for the keys back and he's refusing to give them to her. That's another mistake, Mr. Blake. That's a wrong decision. Okay, so let's look at this. He was where he was supposed to be. He wasn't supposed to be there, and we'll get into the reason why he was not supposed to be there. And then number 2, he's driving a vehicle that he should not be driving. Number 3, she's asking for the keys back, and he's refusing to give the keys back. So who's really at fault for Mr. Blake ended up being shot? Who's really at fault? Let's continue.
Responded to what they thought was, quote, family trouble.
You know, Mr. Strahan, it's interesting how you phrase this incident, how you use your words. That's all I want to say to that.
Complainant says Jacob Blake isn't supposed to be there, and he took the complainant's keys and is refusing to give them back.
So
Was that a good decision, Mr. Blake? But let's get to the end of this.
decided that she didn't want me to take her car, the rental car. And I'm explaining to her, like, you know, my truck is in the shop. So I decided not to give her the keys. It was in her name.
On the
You heard that, right? He decided. Now understand now, let's be clear now. This is on his 8-year-old son's birthday. They're there to celebrate his son's birthday. He's there. She allowed him to be there. Wonder. Now all of a sudden now, there's a confrontation that's going on between him and her, and she calls the police. Now he just admit he decided not to give him to her. Let's go ahead. Let's continue.
We have an alert at this address for 99 for that subject.
So there was a warrant for Mr. Blake's arrest. Why? For aggravated sexual assault or something of that nature. Let's continue.
I'm walking out. I hadn't done anything, so I didn't feel like they were there for me.
How'd that sound? You say he ain't done anything. I'm gonna go on record and say I got some issues with this interview. So I have some big issues with this interview because to tell you the truth, when I listen to this interview and I look at all the articles that's been written up on it, there's some truth that wasn't told here. It smelled like there was a cover up, to tell you the truth, as to what exactly happened and what really went down. Let me continue.
They didn't say why they were there.
They didn't say anything to me.
Did they tell you that they had a warrant for your arrest?
No, I thought that it had been over with.
They tased him multiple times. And the reason that they did it, because he was resisting arrest. That's another wrong decision. Let's deal with the facts. Let's deal with the facts. Let's deal with the truth. Let's continue.
We see you walk away from the officers.
Was that the right decision to make, Mr. Blake? Was that the right decision to make? So who really is at fault here? Let me continue.
Did they try to grab you?
At that point,
Listen to this.
I'm rattled. You know, I realized I had dropped my knife, a
Oh,
little pocket knife.
but everybody was saying he was unarmed. Everybody was saying that he was unarmed, but apparently he just admitted on national TV that he dropped his knife and that he picked his knife back up. I could keep going on. Let me finish this up.
So I picked it up after I got off of him because
Got
they
off of
tased
him.
me and I fell on top of him. Kids is in there, probably face on the window. I'm about to get in here and check on my kids. In the
Oh, now you want to check on your kids.
video, you hear them saying, drop the knife. I think a couple people were saying that, but I didn't hear none of that. I had picked my knife up. I'm like, I'm not really worried. I'm walking away from them, so it's not like they're gonna shoot me. I shouldn't have picked it up. At that time, I wasn't thinking clearly.
Okay. Thank you for saying that. You're absolutely correct, Mr. Blake. You were not thinking clearly. This is what he said on national TV. He was making bad decisions as a father. He was.
So why didn't he just stop and do what the police are asking him to do?
I couldn't hear that. All I heard was screaming. My ears was ringing, so it was all muffled. And when they tased me, I had my hands up.
I'm going to stop right there. Because we already know the outcome. And I think that I've covered enough mistakes that Mr. Blake made, enough bad decisions that Mr. Blake made. But my thing is this, as I stated in the beginning, the people who are suffering the most is not Mr. Blake. His decisions did not only hurt him, it did not only alter his life. I tell my children all the time that every decision that you make, whether bad or good, has a ripple effect. It would affect you for the next 10 years of your life. And it would affect everyone that's connected to you, whether or not they're family, blood, or not. It will affect. Your decision will have a ripple effect toward your future. And we've seen evidence of that, because not only has his life been changed, not for the better, but for the worse. But his mother has to take care of him as well. She has to tend to him. At 29 years old, she has to take care of him. The people who are really affected behind this incident, behind his decisions as a father, is his children. Just think about it. Every August 23rd, which is my understanding is the birthday of his 8-year-old boy, his son would relive that incident for the rest of his life. Can you imagine the emotional trauma that his children, I believe it was 2, 3, it might be 3, 5, and 8 at the time. And it seemed, and I'm grateful that even in hindsight, he did have a relationship with his children. He was involved with his children's life. And that's a good thing because most fathers these days are not. But nevertheless, though, the people who lost the most out of Mr. Blake's decisions was his children. Their life would never be the same because of wrong decisions that Mr. Blake made. And that's all I have to say on this. Share with me your thoughts in the comments below. And until next time, thank you for visiting A Father's Note.